New York City has roughly 1 million buildings. Stack those rooftops end to end, and you have about 40,000 acres of flat, south-facing surface area sitting directly under the sun. For most of the city's history, almost none of it did anything useful. It held water towers, it held HVAC equipment, it held tar paper, gravel, and pigeons. The most valuable real estate market on Earth was leaving an entire category of asset completely idle. That is changing fast. And the mechanism behind the change is one of the most aggressive sets of building laws any city in the world has ever passed. I'm Benjamin, and this is What's Around the World. The common assumption about New York and solar has always been that the city is a bad fit, too dense, too much shading from neighboring buildings, too cloudy compared to the Sun Belt, too complicated to install on century-old brownstones and tenement rooftops that were never designed with any of this in mind. And for a long time, that assumption held up well enough that almost nobody challenged it seriously. New York was the city of finance, fashion, media, and ambition. Solar was something they did in California and Arizona on wide open land under a generous sky. But here is what the assumption missed. New York City has some of the highest electricity rates in the country. Con Edison customers pay around 32 cents per kilowatt hour, which is roughly twice the national average. That means every single kilowatt hour a rooftop solar panel produces in the Bronx or Brooklyn is worth twice as much in bill savings as the same panel producing the same kilowatt hour somewhere in the Midwest. The economics of solar are not just about sunshine hours. They are about the price of the electricity you are replacing. And in New York, that price is very high and getting higher every year without any sign of stopping. Con Edison has been raising rates consistently, averaging about 4% per year for the past decade. Further approved rate increases are already locked in for the coming years. Every time Con Ed sends a bill, the financial case for rooftop solar gets a little stronger. The city also has more large, flat commercial rooftops than almost any other urban center on Earth. A warehouse roof in Queens, a school in the Bronx, a wastewater treatment plant in Brooklyn, a transit authority maintenance facility in Staten Island, a post office loading dock roof in Manhattan. These are not shaded, steeply pitched Victorian roofs. They are flat, open, structurally robust, and sitting directly under the sky. The Urban Green Council, which has analyzed the city's rooftop potential in detail, estimates that New York City's 1 million buildings cover about 40,000 acres. Even accounting for shading, mechanical equipment, and unusable slopes, the available surface area for solar is enormous. The challenge was never really the physics. The challenge was the policy. In 2019, New York City changed the policy. The Climate Mobilization Act, passed by the City Council that year, included a package of building laws that collectively added up to the most ambitious urban climate legislation in American history. Two of those laws, Local Law 92 and Local Law 94, went after the rooftops directly. Starting in November 2019, any new building constructed in New York City and any existing building undergoing a major roof renovation, meaning a full replacement of the roof deck or assembly, was required to cover its available roof space with either solar panels, a green roof, or a combination of the two. Not encouraged, not incentivized, required. As a condition of getting a building permit, the sustainable roofing zone, as the law defines it, is calculated after excluding areas needed for fire code access paths, mechanical equipment, and stormwater infrastructure. Whatever is left has to be productive. For most commercial and residential flat roofs in the 5 boroughs, that means a meaningful amount of solar. Every roof that gets replaced anywhere in the city is now, by law, becoming a power plant. But Local Laws 92 and 94 only capture buildings undergoing renovation. The second law, Local Law 97, is what pushed the entire existing building stock into motion. And Local Law 97 is where the financial stakes get serious. Local Law 97 applies to buildings over 25,000 gross square feet, which covers most of the large apartment buildings, office towers, hospitals, hotels, and commercial properties in the city. Starting in 2024, those buildings are required to meet annual carbon emissions limits. For the first compliance period, running from 2024 through 2029, The caps are set at a level that most large buildings can meet with aggressive efficiency upgrades. But starting in 2030, the limits get significantly tighter, pushing toward an 80% reduction in emissions by 2050. The penalty for missing the cap is not a warning letter. It is a fine of $268 per metric ton of excess carbon emissions, calculated annually, and reported to the city starting in May 2025. For a large office building or apartment complex that is significantly over its limit, that can add up to hundreds of thousands of dollars per year with no ceiling. For some of the most carbon-intensive buildings in the city, the fines could reach into the millions. And because the limits tighten again in 2030, building owners cannot simply pay the fine in 2025 and assume they're done. They have to keep improving. Solar helps. Under the law, every kilowatt-hour generated by a rooftop solar system directly reduces a building's calculated emissions, lowering the fine exposure in a way that is quantifiable from day one. A building owner can sit down with their accountant, model the cost of local law 97 fines over the next decade, compare it to the cost of installing rooftop solar, and arrive at a straightforward business case. Building owners across the city who had spent years treating solar as a feel-good optional upgrade suddenly started treating it as a financial hedge against a mandatory and growing compliance cost. The law didn't ask nicely. It repriced the decision. If this is the kind of policy meets technology story you follow, please subscribe. New videos go up every week on Watts Around the World. The numbers tell the story of what this combination of mandates has produced. As of spring 2024, New York City had 535 megawatts of solar installed across the 5 boroughs, enough to cover the electricity bills of approximately 140,000 average New York City households. Municipal solar capacity, meaning panels on city-owned buildings like schools, firehouses, police precincts, and public facilities, has nearly tripled since 2020. In 2025 alone, the solar energy generated across city government buildings was enough to power the equivalent of 440 median-sized municipal facilities for an entire year. That is up from 160 in 2020. New York State, zooming out to include the whole state, reached 6 gigawatts of distributed solar installations and is pushing toward a target of 70% renewable electricity by 2030. The solar industry in New York City has itself tripled in terms of businesses since 2015, and employment in the sector has more than doubled. Solar installation is now a significant trade in the 5 boroughs in a way it simply was not a decade ago. What the city's rooftops actually look like now is starting to shift in ways you can see with your own eyes if you know to look. Solar canopies are appearing over parking structures and transit facilities. Flat ballasted racking systems are becoming common on brownstones and row houses in Brooklyn and Queens. Schools in environmental justice neighborhoods, which were deliberately prioritized in the city's municipal solar deployment, are generating electricity during the school day. Firehouses, which city planners used as a benchmark unit of size in their capacity calculations, now appear in solar installation inventories. Wastewater treatment plants, with their enormous flat rooftop infrastructure and heavy energy demands, have become significant generation sites. The physics that once seemed like obstacles have turned out to be manageable. Shading is real, but modern panel systems can account for it. Installation on older buildings requires structural assessment, but the industry has developed the expertise. And the combination of high electricity rates, the city's property tax abatement for solar systems, state incentives through the NY Sun program, and the compliance pressure from Local Law 97 has made the financial case for installation genuinely compelling. With payback periods of 6 to 8 years for most city properties, before panels even hit midlife. Here is the honest part of the picture. New York City has set a target of 100 megawatts of solar on city-owned buildings by 2030. As of the most recent analysis, the city is on track to meet the 2035 benchmark, but is moving too slowly to hit the 2030 milestone. It would need to accelerate its annual capacity additions by 26% per year consistently to close the gap in time. The federal 30% residential solar tax credit expired at the end of 2025 under the terms of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And that removal will slow private sector adoption and extend payback periods for homeowners by 1 to 2 years. The solar industry in New York has already flagged the credit's expiration as a real risk to near-term growth, particularly for lower-income households and small building owners who were most dependent on that federal support. And there are still large numbers of buildings in the city, particularly in lower-income neighborhoods, where the upfront costs of installation remain a genuine barrier despite all the incentives that exist. But zoom out for a moment. In 2014, New York City had less than 1 megawatt of solar on city-owned buildings. By 2025, it has more than 30. The private sector added hundreds more. The solar industry tripled. The laws that mandated this change were passed by a city council, not a federal government. They apply to buildings that already exist in a dense urban environment that everyone assumed was wrong for solar. And they are working. New York has 1 million buildings. For most of its history, those rooftops were just surfaces you walked on or didn't. Dead space above a city that never stopped moving. What the Climate Mobilization Act effectively said was that in a city with some of the highest electricity rates in the world and some of the most ambitious carbon targets in the country, leaving that much surface area idle was not acceptable anymore. Does your city have laws like this? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what the rooftop solar situation looks like where you live. I'm Benjamin. Thank you for listening to Watts Around the World.